Now,
on News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
Vince Coglianese.
Good afternoon to you. 5:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Congressman Matt Rosendale joins us this hour at 5:30. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. You know, the Menendez scandal is just the funniest thing ever. I mean, it's totally corrupt. It's sad for our country, but it is amusing what a cartoon character that guy is. Gold bars stacked up at his house, money pouring out of the pockets of all of his clothing. And he was claiming today that, he's just been saving up cash for years. He collects it like baseball cards. He's just been taking it out of his bank account, bringing it home, finding new places to put it. And he says the reason he does that is because of his experience, his family's experience with the Cuban regime. They would confiscate money. And just the thought of it makes him want to keep money at home so that the U.S. government can never do the same to him. For what it's worth, if the U.S. government does that to people, it's because of what his party has done to our country. That'll be the explanation for why the U.S. government is confiscating cash from your bank accounts. And actually, to be fair, it already is happening that Democrats are trying to exert pressure, in some cases successfully, over banks to make it so that people don't have access to their own money or that they aren't allowed to spend their money on things like guns. Or that for instance, a gun store can't open a bank account at a variety of banks because Democrats have gotten in the way and said, no, don't do that. And these bank executives go along with it. It's crazy, actually. They realize the power of money. This is why cash is so important to keep. Fiat currency, to keep it, rather than go to this whole thing of like Bitcoin, government Bitcoin, digital currency, CBDC, they call it, centralized bank digital currency. Because then the government does actually have control over all of your purchasing. They can track everything you're doing, every last dime you're spending. That's really what we want? No. So in a way, Menendez is accidentally correct on the value here of keeping your currency out of the hands of the government. But of course, it is apparent to anybody who reads the indictment and anyone with two brain cells to rub together that this is a very corrupt human being. Very corrupt. You know, bribery is included in the United States Constitution as a reason to impeach a fella. For a reason. And not only Bob Menendez, but Joe Biden has tripped all of the wires on that particular clause of the Constitution. If only members of Congress can find the spine to live up to the oath that they took. That's a whole nother deal. Meanwhile, what is Congress doing? Well, we're spending a lot of money on Ukraine, a lot of money. And so 60 Minutes dug in, apparently, this weekend. And here's a bit of what they dug in on. They said they wanted to go to Ukraine for some answers about how all of this money is being spent. We're talking hundreds of billions of dollars. Now, there hasn't been any meaningful debate in the American public ever since Russia invaded Ukraine last year. No meaningful debate among the populace. In fact, concerns or questions or criticisms have all been cast as Russian propaganda. How dare you ask questions about how the government is spending money we don't even have? So here's 60 Minutes. They said they dug in. What did they find?
We went to Ukraine to get some answers for the people who were bankrolling the war, American taxpayers. How exactly is your money being spent? And who's watching the weapons and the cash to make sure they end up where they're intended?
Why did this take a news magazine piece? Why do we need a full-blown, dramatic 60-minute segment in order to dig into this? Shouldn't this be a matter of routine journalism?
In total, America's pumped nearly $25 billion of non-military aid into Ukraine's economy since the invasion began.
Non-military aid. Let me put that differently without the euphemism. That's just cash. That's just cash that we're pouring into the country for a variety of purposes, none of which involve the actual prosecution of the war, the actual defense of Ukraine, the actual fighting against the Russians. $25 billion at least, and that's a low end.
And you can see it working at the bustling farmers market on John McCain Street in central Kyiv.
People of Ukraine, this is your moment.
The late senator is revered in Ukraine because he pushed the US government to start sending arms to the country after Russia first invaded back in 2014.
So we have Martin Luther King Boulevards in the United States. They have John McCain Street in Kiev.
While in Kiev, we learned that 3 of McCain's former colleagues were also in town. Democratic Senators Elizabeth Warren and Richard Blumenthal and Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. They don't normally agree on much. Together, though, they're some of the staunchest supporters of US funding for Ukraine's resistance.
They're on track to break the Russian army. And the only way they...
According to who? Besides Lindsey Graham saying that. What is the evidence of this? There is no evidence. They're not on track to break the Russian army. In fact, what's happening right now is an immense stalemate that is resulting in a lot of human suffering. And if you cared about human life, you try and figure out a way to bring that to an end, wouldn't you?
Could possibly lose is if we pull the plug on them. Yeah.
The wreckage of Russia's war machine was on display for Ukraine's Independence Day celebrations, even as almost a fifth of the country remains under occupation.
People ask me, is it worth it? Here's what we've gotten for our investment. We haven't lost one soldier. We reduced the combat power of the Russian army by 50%, and not one of us has died in that endeavor.
Are you hearing this? You hear what he's saying? Ukrainians are dying for us, is what he's saying. He's saying that we're using them as cannon fodder for our goal. We're weakening Russia by virtue of this, and luckily no Americans are dying, so therefore this is exactly what we want. We want, and so Ukrainian lives very disposable in Lindsey Graham's mind. It's like whatever. Again, cannon fodder. At least we're not losing Americans.
This is a great deal for America.
You've previously said that it's the best money we've ever spent. That's still true?
Since we helped Churchill stand up to the Nazis.
We have to have confidence that the dollars we're spending are actually being spent in defense of the nation. All of that is important. But that's why we're here.
The senators and other US officials told us there have been no substantiated cases of American weapons being diverted.
Okay, that's like Baghdad Bob level. Like, everything's fine. Every dollar we spent is perfect. It's all the best, and there's no problems here. And stop asking questions. 60 Minutes continues, though, to their credit.
In total, America's pumped nearly $25 billion of non-military aid into Ukraine's...
No, you just heard that portion. Here we go. So now they get into corruption and the hotline that's been established.
An American hotline for Ukrainians to report misuse of assistance from US aid saw a 10-fold increase when these posters went up across the country earlier this year. American officials are now investigating 4 criminal cases involving non-military aid. And 170 Ukrainian government officials, including high-ranking military officers, have been charged in corruption cases so far this year.
170 Ukrainian government officials have been charged in corruption cases this year, including high-ranking military officers. You saw the news recently that Zelensky had to chase out basically all of his defense people, all the top defense officials, because of corruption. They were skimming off the top. They're taking all this money, and then they're paying for all sorts of goods with it. They're paying way above market rates because it was designed to steal the cash. So they're stealing all this American cash, all this generosity from the United States of America, and thievery is occurring. Now, you may look at this, as some have. We talked to a congressman this past week who said, okay, well, some of this is evidence that the Ukrainians are trying to get the corruption under control. When you have prosecutions like this. And that's perfectly fine. But the American people deserve a well-laid-out accounting of how our generosity is being used and misused.
For crimes like embezzlement and accepting bribes.
Embezzlement and accepting bribes. A bunch of Bob Menendez is running around in Ukraine. What are we paying for? Well, according to 60 Minutes, a lot of things.
American taxpayers are financing more than just weapons. We discovered the US government's buying seeds and fertilizer for Ukrainian farmers and covering the salaries of Ukraine's first responders, all 57,000 of them. That includes the team that trains this rescue dog named Joy to comb through the wreckage of Russian strikes looking for survivors. And the US also funds the divers, who we saw clearing unexploded ammunition from the country's rivers to make them safe again for swimming and fishing. Russia's invasion shrank Ukraine's economy by about a third. We were surprised to find that to keep it afloat, the US government is subsidizing small businesses.
So we're sending checks to Ukrainian businesses. It's not just military spending. The media, by and large, again, 60 Minutes, to its credit, is covering what else is happening here. But the way this has been discussed is like, oh, we're paying for tanks, we're paying for military assistance, we're sending in a lot of howitzer rounds and things like this. And this is just to provide military support. We're paying pensions, we're paying first responders, we're paying for farm equipment, we're paying for seeds, we're paying small businesses, and then, of course, we're paying bribery fees to all of these corrupt officials. And you start to wonder, why is it that the American people are a little bit down on how much money we're spending on Ukraine? And then lastly, again, to reemphasize, if we hit a government shutdown this weekend, all of those payments will continue in Ukraine. All of them. Pension payments will keep going out. Government payments will keep going out. You'll have all of the first responders, all the government employees, all the bureaucrats, all the trans spokeswomen. All of them will all be paid. Federal employees here in the United States, kind of a crapshoot when you'll see that money. So, again, what does your government think of you? Zelensky got done his tour over the weekend, Vladimir Zelensky, traveling the West, visiting with the United States, visiting with Canada. And while he was in Canada, he visited with the Canadian Parliament. And there was just a wild moment speaking to Canadian Parliament this weekend. They decided, the head of one of the top officials in Canada decided that he would use the occasion while Zelensky was there at Parliament to honor a 98-year-old war hero. That's how they described him, who fought for Ukraine's independence during World War II. But NBC reports it soon emerged that the man was in fact part of a notorious Nazi unit, leading to fury at the standing ovation he was given in the presence of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. This guy's name is Yaroslav Honka. He's 98 years old. He wiped away tears on receiving the rousing recognition from the Canadian House of Commons on Friday. He was singled out by Speaker Anthony Rota, who called him a hero following a speech by the visiting Ukrainian leader, who in turn raised a fist during the applause. Everybody celebrating a literal Nazi in Canada this weekend. Rota apologized Sunday after he was, quote, subsequently became aware of more information about Honka's past. The Ukrainian nonagenarian, meaning he's in his 90s, did fight the Soviet Union, but is a part of the 14th Waffen Grenadier Division of the SS, a Nazi military unit whose crimes against humanity during the Holocaust are well documented, according to the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center, a Canadian human rights group promoting awareness about the Holocaust and fighting anti-Semitism. So this is what they were doing in Canada this weekend. It all got totally insane. Here they are, Canadian Parliament and Zelensky giving this Nazi a standing ovation.
We have here in the chamber today Ukrainian Canadian world veteran from the Second World War who fought the Ukrainian independence against the Russians and continues to support the troops today, even at his age of 98.
Standing O. It's a big day for Canada and Nazis. It's so crazy. You know, but Politico had coverage of this over the weekend. They called the guy Nazi-linked. Why are you putting spin on that ball? He's a Nazi. He's literally, it's not even like you have to really comb for it, or he was in the same room with someone who, like, drew a swastika in the back of a yearbook or something. No, that's not what this is. The guy was literally a Nazi. And they called him Nazi-linked. Justin Trudeau, son of Fidel Castro, reacted to all of this today. I've got some audio for you coming up on the other side of this traffic. It is 5:21 now.
Tomorrow on the Chris Plante Show, the Democrats' latest panic over Joe Biden's poll numbers.
These numbers are simply staggering for the sitting president.
9 a.m. on WMAL.
Okay, let's take a phone call. We've got Brian calling in from Front Royal, Virginia now. Line 3. Brian, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show, sir.
Yeah, hey, Vince, good afternoon, man. I think you get it all wrong with the Ukrainian guy who fought with the Nazis. I mean, dude, what happened? What did the Russians do when they went into Ukraine? They decimated the country. So that guy was thinking, I'm going to kill as many Russians as I can. Okay, yeah, so I've got to use the Nazis to do it. But, you know, come on, man. I mean, tactically, strategically, that guy was right on point. I mean, I'd do the same thing, and I'm a retired Army.
But the concept here, Brian, is that the Canadian Parliament just stood there and after calling everyone else who disagrees with them a Nazi, including truckers in Canada who are fighting for their rights through all of that COVID tyranny and so much more.
Who cares about the truckers, man? That's a whole different issue.
No. Stay with me. Wait a second, Brian. So that guy, so Trudeau stands up there and calls these people Nazis, Brian. Brian, you got to listen. Let me make my point, then you can respond.
No.
So the truckers say they're called Nazis by Trudeau. And so when they then bring to Parliament a literal Nazi and then honor him, and they give him a standing ovation alongside Vladimir Zelensky, we're not supposed to notice how hypocritical and ridiculous these people are?
Dude, history's hypocritical, brother. Get over it. It's about that one guy who fought the Russians to save his country, but he had to use the Nazis. That's what it's all about, dude. I mean, yeah, you're right. The truckers in Canada, yeah, they were absolutely they were abused. I can't disagree with that.
Yeah.
But we're talking about one dude who went with the Nazis because he had to. I'd do the same thing. We're not talking about, blockading, Interstate 45 in Ottawa. I mean, who cares? This is about a life and death. This is about a guy saving his country. Yeah, Vince, he had to go with the Nazis. Don't necessarily like it. But, hey, look, FDR sat down with Stalin,
right.
dude.
Right, he did.
Him and Churchill sat down with Stalin, a mass murderer.
Yes, who murdered so many more in the Soviet Union. You're totally right about that. But again, the point.
Come on, man. No, there is no point. You're totally wrong.
No, I'm not. I'm totally right. What are you nuts, Brian? Brian, how dare you? How dare you ever say that I'm wrong? That's insane that you would say that. Thank you. No, but I appreciate the call. But again, this guy was a part of, as they say, the 14th Waffen Grenadier Division of the SS. Identified as a Nazi military unit whose crimes against humanity during the Holocaust are well documented. That's, you can defend them if you want, but I'm not taking your side on this. I'm right. How dare you, Brian? All right. Hang tight. We've got a congressman joining us, Matt Rosendale, just minutes away. That's all I had on the Vince Coglianese Show. Good afternoon, 5:35 now. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. We're just days away from a government shutdown. What's actually going to happen? Let's talk to a guy who's on the inside who may have an inside track for us. Congressman Matt Rosendale joins us. He's from Montana's 2nd Congressional District. Sir, good to have you back with us. Thank you.
Vince, always great to be with you, my friend.
I see a lot of drama, sir, in the Republican conference. People now arguing on television. I hear even reports of curse words may have been used behind closed doors. Can you give us a sense of what the infighting's about?
The shame.
What's going on, Congressman?
Well, what is going on? I saw a report on Twitter that came out yesterday that said the Appropriations Committee, which I was aware of, had basically developed their 12 appropriation bills so that we could fund government properly, responsibly, transparently. And they were finished up with that work, Vince, back in July. And this is what we had these big battles about back in January when the speaker's, race was going on. We said, look, there was a group of us that said, what we want to see is the restoration of regular order in Congress. We want to see single subject bills. We want to have 72 hours to review them. We want to make sure that the appropriation bills and process is followed so that we can get away from this continuing resolution to fund government, from omnibuses to fund government, to make sure that everyone is able to represent their district with an equal voice instead of consolidating all of this power into the hands of a few and granting what boils down to special legislative powers or super legislative status to just a few individuals. Mm-hmm. so that everybody can be out there representing their district, right? And so as of July, the appropriation bills were ready. Okay, well, why didn't we start bringing them up to the floor? Okay, so that everybody could debate them. We could discuss them. We could amend them. We could craft something that was more representative of the entire opinion of the conference. Well, we didn't. And that falls directly on the shoulders of Kevin McCarthy. I mean, I am sorry. He's the one who directs when that work is going to take place.
But what's the answer, though? Why would it take until now? I mean, is it because he didn't have the votes, or because he didn't want some sort of public fight to spill out that would diminish the Republican hand? What is it?
I mean, the votes aren't lined up now. This is work that could have been done that wasn't done. Why wasn't it done? And that's my question. Was it done out of malice? Or was it done out of negligence? Either way, he didn't get it done. And then we went back to our districts in August, and everybody traveled around. Well, I can't say everybody did, but I know I did. I traveled around. I met with businesses. I met with elected officials. I met with schools. And then we came back in, and it's September 1, and now everybody's running around like SpongeBob and Patrick with their hair on fire, saying, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? It's like, well, my deal was we're going to have to pass the appropriations bills. And the time that it takes to do that is the time that it takes to do that. Because what I'm not willing to do, Vince, is to sign off on a continuing resolution that by definition continues Nancy Pelosi's spending and Joe Biden's policies. I spent 2 years voting against all of their spending and all of their policies, and now what a continuing resolution would do is simply extend them. And now we hear, well, it's only going to be for a short period.
Right.
And what's a short period? And then all of a sudden they set the time frame up that our back is up to Christmas, and they're going to try and pass another big omnibus bill again.
I'm familiar with that. That was what we saw last Christmas. I mean, that was just an awful thing. And in fact, Kevin McCarthy was, I remember, really resentful that he was cut out of the process entirely last year when Mitch McConnell just decided, no, we're just going to do a bunch of spending and we're going to leave you out of this process. And a lot of people rightfully ticked off last year. So, why wouldn't McCarthy want to, escape that fate again?
Exactly. And so that's what we're saying. So look, after we demanded, okay, and basically used the maneuver to force the hand last week of McCarthy to start discussing these things, myself and a group of conservatives sat down on Thursday afternoon, and we had a large group that got together, a very diverse cross-section of the conference, the more moderate members, everybody. We sat around and said, okay, everybody has a little bit of a lack of trust for each other now, so what we're going to do is develop a rule over the weekend that allows us to bring 4 of the appropriation bills to the floor starting on Tuesday. And so I stayed here on Friday, and we worked on that rule. I stayed here on Saturday. We worked on that rule. And basically now, tomorrow, they're going to bring the rule to the floor, and it's going to be the process will be introduced that we can bring Department of Defense, the Department of Homeland Security, the State and Foreign Operations bill, which is basically State Department, and the Agriculture bill this week. And then everybody says, okay, so if we pass those, what do you do after that? Look, I can't tell you exactly how long it's going to take all of this stuff to get done, okay? But what I will tell you is this is the way that you are properly going to fund government. And beyond this, then you don't know what you're going to have, except for a great big pork-filled sandwich that a lot of us are not going to sign off on. So if they can get these appropriation bills done, at least, Vince, I will tell you that right in the neighborhood of 70% of the government would be funded. Our military would be funded so we could keep our security straight. Our Border Patrol would be funded so that we could – I can't say we're going to keep it straight because we don't have the policies in place yet under this administration to make sure that we can stop this vast flow of illegal immigrants and illicit drugs coming into the country. But we can begin that path. But what concerns me more than all of this, honestly, some simple numbers. $33 trillion in national debt, okay?
Yep.
We're going to collect about $5 trillion this year in revenue. The federal government will. $1 trillion of that, 20%, 1/5 of it, however you want to say it, is going to be necessary to pay the interest on the national debt, on that $33 trillion. So that leaves us $4 trillion. They're proposing to spend, I'm looking at papers here right now, somewhere in the neighborhood of almost $7 trillion a year, okay? So you're going to have $3 trillion or close to it that gets added on to the national debt, onto that $33 trillion number.
Right.
Within 5 years, Vince, not 50, not 20, within 5 years, the national debt, based on these projections, and I don't see anything that's going to shake away from it, we will be at $50 trillion national debt. So then, instead of 20% of the annual revenue going to service the debt, it's going to be in the neighborhood of 50%, Vince. So you tell me, when everybody complains about the difficult decisions that we're trying to make now, and why are we being so stubborn, what are you going to do in 5 years when 50% of the annual revenue is going to be consumed by interest? What are you going to tell the seniors then, and the veterans, and the military? What are you going to tell them then?
You know, one of the things that needs to be, I totally agree with you because it all makes obvious. I think it makes sense to me. But I think in terms of selling this to the public broadly, I don't know if people have realized, maybe they do now, how interconnected the inflation is with out-of-control government spending. Like, if you want runaway inflation, you want a completely out-of-control economy, let the debt get to a point that we can't even afford to pay it anymore.
Well, that's what people ask me all the time. How long are we going to continue to let this debt accumulate? And I say, well, one of two things is going to happen. Either you're going to have the debt pile up so high and there's going to be so much borrowed money to service our federal government that your dollar's not going to be worth anything. Or, and this is the scary one, you're going to have the global community get together and say, you know, that reserve currency that we've been calling the U.S. dollar, it's tied to the petrodollar. That's where it is. We're not going to recognize that as a reserve currency anymore. And you've got, I think it's 60 nations, the BRICS, that have gotten together, and they're looking at recognizing another currency. You've got Russia and China working together with Saudi Arabia. They're already using the yuan. Vince, I will tell you something. Acquired debt is a major problem, but if these countries all get together and they refuse to recognize the dollar as the reserve currency, excuse me, and they want to change that, we'll see an economic downturn like this country has never seen, including the Great Depression.
Oh, it's also depressing. So, are there people who think like you on this subject then? I mean, what does your coalition look like? Because unfortunately, it doesn't appear that any Democrats are a part of it. Obviously, the schoolhouse rack understanding of Congress is you need the Senate's buy-in here, controlled by Democrats. You need the White House's buy-in here, controlled by a Democrat. What are the chances of getting something achievable done here that is good for us?
I'm so hopeful because here's what I will tell you. There's a lot of people that speak to me privately that agree with us. They really do, and they cannot refute anything that I've just told you. What is so disappointing is that so few of them are willing to take the actions that are necessary in order to change direction. I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, everybody can see the Titanic heading for the iceberg.
Yes.
And they know it, and they don't, refuse it, but they don't want to grab the wheel. And it's like, guys, we were sent up here to be that person, to be bold, to be brave, to be courageous, to say, look, these are difficult decisions that have to be made, and we are the ones that have to take them. And to stand up and be truthful with the voters. And that's what I try to do on a daily basis. I try to stay away from the rhetoric. I mean, I really do, and just use facts And I will have these discussions with anybody, because if I'm wrong, by golly, let me know. But that's how I see it. I mean, I went to a room full of bankers and said, okay, let me ask you guys, okay? If you had, take the decimal point, just use it and move it, 12 spaces to the left, so that instead of saying trillions of dollars, just talk about millions of dollars, something that's a little bit more manageable. And I say, if you had somebody that had a $33 million loan, they started off, just 10 years ago, and it was like $8 million, and it has accumulated to 33, and over the next 5 years, it's going to accumulate to $50 million, and they're not paying anything on it. They're paying on the interest, but they're not paying the principal down.
Yep.
Would you renew that loan? There's not a banker in the world that would renew that loan.
I know. It's also crazy. How is it that we're at a point, though, where the government of Ukraine is essential, so therefore they would continue to get paid throughout a shutdown, and our own government isn't?
That should disturb everyone who understands that's what's going on, that if there is a government – and by the way, it's not a shutdown. Most people recognize that now. They've heard the little boy cry wolf so many times. They've recognized 15% of the federal government will shut down. Paychecks or checks are going to be going out at the end of the month, so our military is going to be covered. Social Security checks are going to be covered. These things will go on. It's going to be about 15%, and the administration will try to find the most painful place to demonstrate that government is shut down, okay? But it's a very small part of really what's going to take place. And this is all just a direct result of people pushing off what actions that people that have elected us expect us to do.
One last thing. This week, we're going to get the first impeachment inquiry hearing into Joe Biden. That's on Thursday. What role does that impeachment inquiry hearing play in all of this? I saw quite a few people suggesting that McCarthy wanted to get this going at this very moment to kind of distract from this spending fight. There's no question in my mind that Joe Biden deserves impeachment and an impeachment inquiry, and to the extent that it can get more evidence to the American people is good. But how are these things interconnected, if at all?
Call me a cynic, but I'm sorry. I truly believe we've had months and months and months, again, that could have been introduced, that impeachment inquiry, and turned over to a judiciary so that they could begin doing their work. And I'm sorry. I really do believe that it was turned out now so that Speaker McCarthy can walk over and point to that and go, if we don't fund the government, then we're not going to be able to continue to do this investigation. Okay, let me tell you something. If it takes us an additional couple of weeks to get this appropriation process sorted out so that we can fund government in a responsible, transparent manner, that inquiry is not going to suffer for 2 weeks. He's been 9 months. Okay, and now all of a sudden it's got to come out. That will wait 2 weeks. But funding government properly and responsibly, that needs to be taken care of.
Congressman Matt Rosendale, always good to have you with us, sir. Thank you very much for your insight today.
Hey, thank you so much, Vince, and thanks to all your listeners. I appreciate you.
Amen. 5:51 now. All right, let's check in on the phone lines. We've got Greg calling in from Lorton, line 5. Greg, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince, thanks again for taking my call. I know we're short on time. I just wanted to state some things. That last interview you had with that congressman, I really liked him. He sounded like he's on point, love the guy. But the thing is, I have 2 sons that are in the United States military. One's in the Coast Guard and Special Forces. The other one is a lieutenant in the Army for field artillery.
How cool.
They have both been notified that their checks will not, if a government shutdown occurs, that they will not be, they're going to get paid. Don't get me wrong, but it will be delayed. And I think that's important for a young man who's 23 years old, trying to make it on military pay. I mean, that hurts.
No question. No question. I think the key here.
I kind of wanted to. Yeah.
I totally agree with you. I think the key to remember here is, it's your sons are fighting for this country, and God bless them for that. And for if you don't have grandchildren yet, hopefully grandchildren in the future, we'd like to have a country to leave them. So at some point, we've got to make the tough decisions to save that country. I think that's worthwhile. I think that's what Congressman Matt Rosendale was saying. Appreciate your family's service, Greg. Really appreciate the call today. And the great one, Mark Levin, is up next right here on WMAL.